Okay, moving on to the British general election. We go to the polls on Thursday. We'll get some idea of the result Thursday night. Exit polls tend to be very accurate, more accurate, even within the first minutes than opinion polls. Either way, at the moment, news seems to be dominated by the trials and tribulations of Nigel Farage and Reform UK. It's really news to me that Reform UK attracts bigots and racists and homophobes and misogynists. Well, I would never have guessed it. So Channel 4 has done us all a big favor, gone out there and filmed a couple of canvases and recorded their bigoted views. So apparently, I'm sort of putting the asterisks together. This guy, and his name is Andrew Parker, who is some sort of actor, but doesn't seem to have been, to me at least, set up by Channel 4. That's the accusation of Nigel Farage, that he was in the pay or something like that of Channel 4 and was acting common, acting a rough, when he's in reality a smooth, talking middle class individual. That doesn't seem to be true. But what he was doing was calling our present Prime Minister a fucking packy. In our press, we have asterisks in the middle of that, so I'm working it out on the BBC. That is bleeped, even when the Prime Minister himself repeated those words. So I'm only guessing at those words, but I think it's a pretty good guess. I don't know why people do that. It's as if, swear words and insults almost have a magic property to them. It's a bit like Socialist Workers' Party when they want to be really daring. They have the word F, asterisk, K. And well, we all know what the word stands for. We all know what it means. Why not just say it? Why not say the word fuck? I can't really see the problem. After all, there was a West End play on Not 2 recently, admittedly. Mark Ravenhill, Mark Ravenhurst, shopping and fucking. Either way, of course, it's no surprise, is it, that Reform UK attracts such people. These people in general are refugees from the Tory party, and they're from the Tory party of people that admired Margaret Thatcher, but also admired Enoch Powell. And I'm not a regular visitor to Tory party, local offices, but I have, and I have seen local offices. This is a few years ago with a portrait on the wall. Sometimes it's the Queen. Next is Margaret Thatcher. But not uncommonly, you'll find a portrait of Enoch Powell, of course, who's infamously associated with the rivers of blood speech and basically saying that Britain is going to the dogs because of migrants, and gave, how should I put it, the green light to racists to really come out of the woodwork. They'd been given permission by a patrician to express their views. So again, famously, you had London dockers marching to Westminster, chanting Enoch, Enoch, Enoch. Either way, what's interesting to me is that showing the existence, which some on the left still deny for whatever reason, I can't understand it, that there's official anti-racism. Not only did you get Rishi Sunak coming out to denounce Reform UK and Nigel Farage and, of course, the Labour Party, you also had Nigel Farage himself denouncing this Andrew Parker, saying we don't want anything to do with racists. You had various leading figures from Reform UK getting their platform on the BBC Radio 4 News, one of who was pointed out by the Radio 4 interview, well, aren't you gay? This is after one of the canvassers said that, the rainbow flag on a police car was, some sort of symbol of depravity. He said, well, yes, I'm gay. And not only am I gay, but half the Reform office is also gay. And we also had a Reform UK, again, leading figure put on. I listened to the radio, I wasn't watching the TV, but as I understand it, this guy was from a Bengali background. He was also put on and said, yeah, we thoroughly disapprove of racists. Not surprising, is it? So we get Nigel Farage denouncing not only this particular canvasser, but also on, live denouncing three Reform UK candidates. So I just really wanted to reinforce the point that I do think official anti-racism exists. Of course, racism exists. It's just that in its old way, it's no longer socially acceptable. If you express particular views, if you come out with particular phrases, you put yourself beyond polite society, civilized society. You're there to be denounced. But at the same time, of course, what we get is the Labour Party basically competing with Reform UK when it comes to who can be nasty to migrants. We get the Tory Party competing with Reform UK, who can be nasty to migrants. It's true that shooting them or using them for target practice isn't recommended, but apparently for the Tory party, sending people off to Uganda is acceptable. For the Workers' Party, George Galloway's Workers' Party wants the Royal Navy diverted from the Red Sea to the English Channel, so it actually forces boats back. Of course, no one would fall in the water, would they? No one would get drowned under those circumstances, would they? And if they do get to Britain, what's the Labour Party proposing? A faster processing of people. But the reality is that mass migration will keep happening, not because Britain is such a heaven, it's just that where people come from is such a hell. And all you need to do is tick off the leading countries where migrants are coming from, and you already see the problem. It's Libya, it's Syria, it's Afghanistan, it's Iran, it's Kurdistan. That tells you everything you need to know. And of course, in terms of Europe, it's sub-Saharan Africa. It's IMF adjustment programs. So that's the cause. These people will not cease coming, and the working class movement needs to be clear. Of course, migrants coming to Britain adds to competition when it comes to labour, the commodity of labour power. And therefore, our answer is actually to organise people, and not only organise people in Britain, trade unions, political parties, but to organise internationally and fight for a world that the working class controls. So, of course, we're not against migration, but mass migration is clearly a sign of social distress, social breakdown. That isn't something we welcome. We're not going to turn people away. We're not going to treat people as if they are the cause of falling wages or shortage of housing or a lack of doctors or a lack of school places. Okay. What we also have a consensus on is national chauvinism. And all you need to do is look at the Labour Party publicity. A friend of mine was asking me, have we had the Labour Party material through? And I said, well, yeah, it's just on the stairs down there. She picked it up and went, "Oh my God, it reminds me of the National Front." And I think there's a truth there, that what Keir Starmer is doing is changing the Labour Party and presenting it as a nationalist party in a way that you wouldn't have had to such an extent in the past. Either way, what I wanted to do is to quote an article from a guy called David Edgerton. He's a lecturer, I think, at Imperial College, and he deals with the history of technology. Either way, there was an article of his in The Guardian of where he said, well, you know, in terms of the Labour Party, we should treat the Labour Party as what it says it is, a conservative party. He you know, speculates that maybe in office, the Labour Party will be less conservative than it says it will be. After all, if you look at the Blair government, it was less conservative than it promised to be. It actually did spend money. I can remember with our own press just looking at a headline at one point opposing Labour cuts and just pointing out, what Labour cuts? Labour's throwing money at the National Health Service, at education. It just wasn't announcing it from the rooftops. Lots of that money was wasted, I'd readily concede. So PFI, Public Finance Initiative, complete waste of money. Either way, money was spent. Anyway, our friend David Edgerton was, I don't know whether it's his word. I'll credit him unless I'm corrected. He was talking about so little separating the parties, in spite of the sound and fury from the Daily Telegraph saying that there's only X days to save Britain from open borders and the collapse of the British Army and the end of civilization as we know it and stuff like that. But he actually, as I say, I'll credit him with this. He's coined this term, Starmnakerism, Starmnakerism. Anyway, joining their names together, and I think that's right. And so, although you get this, heated exchanges between these two leaders on BBC and Sky and ITV debates, in reality, just like on the migration question, when it comes to arms, when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Israel, Palestine, and Gaza, there is nothing separating them. And what, of course, Starmer's done in terms of his election strategy is triangulation. It's going right up to the Tories. So, in the words of our left Labour ex-MP Dennis Skinner, bless his soul, nothing separates these two parties except a cigarette paper. That's all that separates. So that's the width of the programmatic difference between the two. And I think David Edgerton, when it comes to Starmer and Sunak, who's pursuing a core vote strategy for reasons we'll come to, there's a truth there. And he was making the point, I'd not heard of this one either, that someone way back had coined the term Blatcherism, Blair Thatcherism, right? I'd not heard that one, but I had heard of Thatchnakerism. That was me joining together the term Thatcher and Kinnock. That was definitely me. It was quoted, my claim to fame, it was quoted in Private Eye. Either way, I invented that one, and I don't know about the other three. But of course, we're all referring back to the 1950s when there was this term Butsklerism. And Butler was the Tory Chancellor, and the other bit of it, the LL, was Gateskill, Hugh Gateskill, the leader of the Labour Party. Butler and the Tory Party, both under Churchill, but also under Eden and other prime ministers, was basically buying into the social democratic, post-World War II social democratic consensus, the NHS, council houses, education, social progress, all of that. Okay, you can say that the Tories had no choice in the matter, and that would be true. You can say that the Tories were doing their best to sabotage it. That's undoubtedly true. But there was a reality to it. And I can remember Tory prime ministers not only coming out with, "You've never had it so good," but Tory prime ministers boasting about how many tens of thousands of council houses the government had built last year and the year before that and the year before that, and how many hundreds of thousands of council houses they would build in the future. So there was a consensus around unemployment is now just frictional. There was a consensus with the good old America, good old USA financing it around right-wing social democracy. We don't live apparently any longer in a capitalist society. We live in a post-capitalist society. I can remember at school when I started to go to the left and started using the C word. My teachers, God bless them as well, would tell me, "Boy, don't you know that we don't live in the 19th century? We don't send children up chimneys anymore as sweeps. We don't live under a capitalist society. We're living in a Keynesian society. We're living in a society of where governments, where states control things. We don't have slumps. We don't have unemployment. Living standards go up each year. And in the words of Harold Wilson, we can look forward to a society of abundance, of undreamed of prosperity and leisure." That was something that was put forward not only by Labour, but also by the Tories. Hence this word Buttsclerism. But you see what I've tried to do. Yes, that was in the 50s, a consensus between the two main parties. You actually get a joining of a word, Buttsclerism, to describe it. But look at today. Yes, a joining together, but look what's happened. We haven't just seen a seamless continuation. We've seen step by step by step a moving to the right. And Harold Wilson moved to the right and basically laid the ground for Thatcher. What you had is, for example, the last Wilson government, Wilson-Callaghan government, put through a whole raft of seemingly pro-trade union, legislation. It did empower the trade unions to recruit. The TUC membership went up to 12 million with a much smaller workforce than we've now got. But of course, what that went hand in hand with was industrial tribunals. So instead of workers going on strike to protect their shop steward, you had to go to court, and that would drag on, as we know, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. What you had is the disempowering of shop stewards network. So instead of dues being collected by shop stewards, it was collected by the bosses. The trade union bureaucracy loved it because it stopped wildcat strikes. That's what they used to call them back in the 60s. But that laid the ground for Thatcher. But yes, what you've seen since the 40s and 50s is a steady shift to the right. And my expectation is that on Thursday we'll have a Labour government, but it will be the most right-wing Labour government in history. And I don't think there's any doubt about that. David Edgerton speculates about the possibility, as I said, of maybe Starmer is a wolf, class war wolf in Tory clothing. But looking at the state of Britain, looking at the world economy, I don't think we should hold our breath. And nor do I think that we should bank on some crisis of expectation. I think this is just ridiculous talk, or some big wave of strikes. There could well be strikes. Of course there could, but not some, 1936 France sort of crisis. I think that's just fanciful. It's an excuse for people to vote Labour across the board, auto-Labourism. I don't think that does the left any good whatsoever.